So I was going to do this last night, but I was actually getting myself ready for today because, as you saw in the video I posted earlier, I had a job interview at Rite Aid, and long story short, it looks like right now that I'm possibly going to be able to get in there, but we'll see. Anyway, though, I've decided, you know what, better late than never. Let's talk about AEW Dynamite's debut on TBS. Now, for any of you that are wondering why it's now on TBS, long story short, last year during one of their investment calls or one of those events, if you will, where Warner Media was represented, news came out that Turner Networks had purchased a distributing license for the NHL, mostly for TNT. Now, what this did is it kind of interfered with AEW. You see, the games, the NHL games, were going to be seen on Wednesday nights. AEW Dynamite was, home on Wednesday nights. They were at home on Wednesday nights, I should say. So what happened is Tony Khan, I guess you could say the last remaining 4 or 5 months or something like that of 2021, had to, move around and adjust, Dynamite into different, places, so people can view it. Sometimes he'd do it on a Saturday night. Sometimes he'd do it on a Friday. Sometimes he would actually, and he stuck with this for the time being, so I guess everybody could see it live. He decided to go with the all-live broadcasting structure of, hey, we're going to go live not just on the East and Central time zones, but we're going to go live all across the board. And what this did was it got them some viewers. There's no doubt about it. It got them some viewers, no doubt about it. But it also kind of lost them some viewers because when you look at the West Coast and even Hawaiian time and Alaskan time, a lot of people are, coming home from work or still at work or they're in school or getting out of school, so they can't really watch the show live. They have to wait to watch it on demand or on replay. And this kind of detracted a lot of the viewership that they had garnered in the past, several years before this. So obviously realizing that, moving it around to different nights to get a good viewership number, or even, going live, all across the board, might be troublesome. Tony Khan obviously made the decision, talked to Turner Networks and said, let's move Dynamite over to TBS. Because one, not only would it get more viewership, because TBS is seen in more households than TNT, believe it or not, and that is a fact because anytime you get basic cable, one of the channels you get will be TBS with, right off the bat. So you pretty much get to view any TBS programming that's on there, without a extra charge or anything. TNT, on the other hand, even though they've been around for over 30 years, basically a little bit more newer in their stance. I mean, I think they debuted at 88, 89. So, they've been, like I said, they've been around for over 30 years. Actually going on, what would be this year? 33 years? 33? So they've been almost 35, almost close to 35 years in 2024. They've been around for quite some time, but not as long as TBS. So them being the younger brother, the younger sibling, if you will, of the Turner Networks, between the two, they're the more newer one, they're the more fresher one, they're the more recent one, they're the more appealing and attractive one when it comes to putting program on there, whether it's original program or newer whether it is original program or what sports or whatever, they're the more attractive, option. And thus, by being the more attractive option, it puts them into that scenario of they have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? They have to be lumped in with a different cable package for you to purchase to even watch, TNT. The same way, other Turner networks like, let's say, Cartoon Network at one point were lumped into different cable packages, even to an extent, even now, to this day, what I'm trying to say, they'll basically, you have to pay more to get more if you want to view these channels. So Tony Khan realized, obviously, that one, he's going to have to move the Dynamite all around at times, or he's going to have to take that decision that he did make, and that's go live across the board so that everybody could watch it, as well as not interrupt or interfere with NHL programming. And then, like I said, at this Warner Media event, or whatever this event was, made the decision that they were going to go to TBS. Now, this came at the expense, I should say, that TNT, they're going to keep Rampage, which was also announced at this event. They're going to keep it, even though people thought both were heading to TBS. Only Dynamite right now. And that there were going to be quarterly specials starting, this Saturday with Battle of the Belts. So TNT is still going to have AEW programming, but TBS is going to have the flagship show. They're going to have the Nitro, if you will, of AEW, that being Dynamite. Now, with that said, I didn't watch much of Dynamite last night. I was following on social media because, like I said, I was getting myself ready, as well as I also was eating dinner. And, I don't know if it was live across the board still, or it went back to what it was, to where it would be live on the East and Central time zones, but pre-taped and shown later on the West, Mountain, Alaskan, and Hawaiian time zones. I don't know if it went back to that or remained live across the coast. Somebody let me know about that. But I can tell you this: the viewership numbers, according to those that I follow that did see it, even though the viewership numbers are not that much, I think they said one number was 1.04 million, and then 0.43 million or thousand or whatever. So I don't know, I don't know which one. I mean, obviously it's a good number. There's no doubt about that, especially for the debut on TBS. But I don't know which one is the more, the number that they look at the most as being like, okay, how can we keep this audience in tune with what we have? So we'll just have to keep an eye on that. But again, I don't know if it was live across the board or if it went back to what it was beforehand. Anyway, though, let's talk about Dynamite before I ramble on a lot more than I should. Let's talk about Dynamite. It opened up once again with Bryan Danielson and Hangman Adam Page for the world title. One of the big differences is you had judges at ringside, which were Paul White, formerly The Big Show, Jerry Lynn, and Mark Henry. And already I saw people on social media being like, looking at how Paul White was eyeing the match and everything, and already I saw people being like, "Oh, he's going to cost somebody." Didn't happen, because thankfully I think whether you want to give him crap or you don't, and whether he knows what he's, whether he thinks about what he's going to say on social media, before he says it or he doesn't, one thing you got to give Tony Khan and his booking team is at least they realize that if they're going to have someone like Paul White out there, who's been known to turn heel just because of no freaking reason or whatever reason out of the blue, they realize, hey, let's not do that. Let's just keep him as a judge and go from there. And that's what they did. But last night, like I said, they opened up with Danielson and Page, part 2 for the world title. It went over 30 minutes, not the time limit, which the judges were there for, but it went 30 minutes. Both guys got busted open. They were bleeding. People called it a bloodbath, from a wrestling standpoint. And in the end, Hangman Page ended up beating Bryan Danielson to retain the championship. Now, I could see from a storyline standpoint, Danielson showing up either tomorrow night on Rampage or next week on Dynamite, shaking Page's hand, and then stating that the Hangman Page that he saw and fought against these past two matches, that's the Hangman Page that needs to be, needs to be focused basically as the world champion. I could see that. I could see Bryan Danielson maybe go back to a face by acknowledging not only was Hangman Page the better man, and everything, but he proved to him that he is worthy of being world champion. But the Page he faced, twice is the Hangman Page that needs, to be the champion, that needs to focus and be serious as the world champion, because there's going to be others coming after him. So I could see that potentially happening. I could be wrong, but I think the main crutch of this story, to kind of close out this chapter, will be Bryan Danielson acknowledging that Page is the future. He is the man. He is a worthy champion. But that the Page he's faced the past 2 times is the Page that always needs to be ready, needs to be on call, needs to be focused on being champion and keeping that title. So I could see, Bryan Danielson going back to a face, by acknowledging that Page is the better man, shaking his hand, and even stating that, hey, if you think I'm willing to get dark with you, if you think I'm willing to get mean with you, basically heelish with you, what do you think others will do, to you just to get that? And that, I'm guessing that's what, I'm guessing that's what the story's going to be, that he wanted his goal, bring out the best in Page, but also bring out the side of Page that needs to focus on being the AEW World Champion, and basically watch his back now that he has this title, because everybody, even those he considers friends, will be targeting him and trying to get a shot at it, which potentially could be the story they go with. Like, basically they could turn Hangman Page into a modern day Steve Austin, all thanks to this encounter with Bryan Danielson, because basically Bryan Danielson's message would be overall, DTA, don't trust anybody as long as you're champion. And there you go. But the one thing about Danielson, though, about him going to these, these time limit draws, if you will, with Omega and Page, and then putting Page over the way he did, to me, what this is it's a basically a message being sent to us as fans, not just AEW fans, but as wrestling fans. What we saw here with Bryan Danielson, I want to call him Daniel Bryan because I've been used to calling him that the whole time. But what we see here with Danielson, and to an extent what we're going to be seeing with the likes of CM Punk very soon, maybe not so much because he's more, not so recently out of WWE like Danielson. He's more like, a fresh face for AEW because he's been gone. But, like I said, eventually we'll see it with Punk. Like I said, we've seen it with Danielson. We've seen it with Christian Cage. We've seen it with Matt Hardy. Basically what I'm getting at is a lot of these former WWE talents that can still go in this ring and everything on a regular basis. Since they've been in AEW, most of their job has been put over the new talent. Put over the younger talent that needs to get known. Needs to get their name out there so that people will realize when they see someone like a Hangman Page, oh, that guy's the AEW World Champion. He works for All Elite Wrestling. Let's see if I can go talk to him, maybe get a picture, hopefully no charge, whatever. The same thing with Sammy Guevara. People look at that and they're like, Sammy Guevara, hey, this guy, he's a talent. He's the future of the business. Oh, and guess what? He beat Rusev to become champion. He beat Rusev, a.k.a. Miro, to become champion, TNT champion, when nobody else could. Nobody else could, beat him clean. He did it. Now, did he have to lose to Cody, a couple weeks ago? Not necessarily, but if he's going to get it back, then that will be Cody's job as well. Because, again, here's the thing. Cody Rhodes, also a former WWE talent, just like his brother is a former WWE talent. They don't have to do it, but guess what? Since they've been here, they've actually put over the younger talent. They put over the talent that needs to get over, if you will. Another prime example, Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho, his goal since he's been here, putting the younger talent over, putting the unknown talent over. The same with Jack Swagger. Jake Hager, if you will. He's been putting the younger talent over. Sean Spears, to an extent, has done the same thing. FDR, the Revival, to an extent, has done the same thing. Yeah, they've all gotten wins. They've all won championships, to an extent, except for Danielson and Punk and all them. But their main goal, at the end of the day, even Aleister Black, Malachi Black, and Andrade El Idolo, formerly Tsunamis, their goal, since they've been, in AEW, is to put over the unknown talent. The talent that, wouldn't get a legitimate shot anywhere else unless they went through a developmental system, got rebranded, and then became what that one company wants them to be. The same with Pac, Neville, if you will. All these men and women, because we even got to lump in Ruby Soho, if you will, Ruby Riott, to a point, have all come in and have basically put over the unknown talent. Like Ruby last night, everybody thought Ruby was, going to get the TBS title, right? Nope. Ruby, since she's been here, what has she done? She has put over Britt Baker. Now she's put over Jade Cargill, if you will. Both in championship matches. Why? Because even though eventually she is going to get a championship run, we see that coming. Even though she's eventually going to get that, her goal, since she's been here, just like the people I've mentioned, put over the unknown talent. Put over the talent that needs to get their name out there. That is what every single former WWE talent that has been signed by this company, that is what their goal is. Not just to go out and have some great matches, get some victories under the belt here and there. None of that. None of that, if you will, but mainly to get over the younger talent. Get over the future of this business. And that's about it. That's about it. I mean, I'll give you an example. Mercedes Martinez. She had a cup of tea, in Impact. She had a brief run in WWE. So, what is her status going to be? Well, if I was to guess, I would say she's going to get some victories under her belt. But her main goal right now is to put over Thunder Rosa. That's her goal. Unless Thunder Rosa is going to put her over, I think because Mercedes is the more veteran of the two, the more experienced, her goal, put Thunder Rosa over, build Thunder Rosa up to challenge Jade. Or Britt. One of the two anyway. That's her goal. That's why she's here. And I know that's hard to believe. I know that's hard for anybody to fathom that's glad to see a lot of these men and women that WWE, didn't really give an opportunity to shine in the ring and show what they could do on the mic, on their own, without any scripts or anything like that. I know this is hard for people to hear, but it's the truth. I mean, when you really think about it, ever since a lot of these people have signed with AEW that used to work under the WWE banner, as I said, they've had their victories, they've had their championships and all that, but what have they done ultimately in the end, when you really get down to it? They have put over the talent of AEW, the future talent of AEW. That's what they've done. You might say, well, CM Punk hasn't done that yet. CM Punk's going to get there. His program with MJF, that's the goal. That is the goal. You think Chris Jericho, could have easily beat MJF in the first encounter? Absolutely. Absolutely. But guess what? He didn't. He waited for his turn. And eventually he did get his victory back. But in the first encounter, he put MJF over not once, but twice. Why? Because MJF is the future. That's what CM Punk's goal is going to be. CM Punk's goal, whether anybody wants to hear it or not, put MJF over. That's his goal. That has been the goal of every single man and woman that has come in from WWE to AEW. That has been their main goal. Put over the future of the company. Put over the unknown, if you will. And that is a fact. That is a true fact that nobody wants to hear. Nobody wants to talk about. That is a true fact. Yeah, they'll put on some great matches. Everybody talks about Danielson, Bryan Danielson and Minoru Suzuki, right? And, and the great match they had on that buy-in, before Rampage a couple months ago. And, Daniel Bryanson winning that. Hey, here's the thing. Suzuki, he's not an AEW original. He is basically a legendary Japanese wrestler that's been going on for a long time, can still go, can get as violent as the best of them, but his goal was to establish Danielson as as a player in All Elite Wrestling. But Danielson's ultimate goal since being here was to put over the unknown, the AEW originals. Same with Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley, him losing to Omega, even though people knew who Omega was, him losing to Omega was to put Omega over because Omega was an AEW original. Him losing to Lance Archer the way he did in that Texas Death Match for the IWGP US title, guess what? That was to put Lance Archer, an AEW original, over. Now you might say, Lance Archer ain't an AEW original. Maybe not. If you will, maybe not. He did have a run in WWE. He did have a run in Impact, but he has reinvented himself to the point that he is looked at and viewed by many that know about his history as an AEW original, and that's why Moxley came to be here to put him over. Not just to be able to go wherever he wants and fight and have great matches, but to put over guys like Archer, to put over guys like maybe Suzuki. That was his goal. That is his goal, period. And again, I know people don't want to hear that, but it's a fact. It is the truest of facts when you get down to it. It is the truest of facts. And last night on TBS, we saw two examples of that. With Danielson putting over Hangman Page and Ruby Soho putting over Jade Cargill. We saw that. Now, I know people will say that the moment that Jade was entered into the TBS tournament and the TBS title was revealed, everybody said, oh, that was meant for Jade anyway. We don't know that. We can assume that right now. We can say that right now. But we don't know that. When Ruby Soho came in, everybody pointed at the fact that, oh, it's going to be for her now. Because she didn't win the title away from Britt, they're going to say, now it's for her. And that might be true. But here's the thing. When you get down to it, ladies and gentlemen, Ruby's goal since she's been here is not just to have some great victories like her debut match in the Casino Battle Royal, but her goal, like I said, like the others, is to put people over. Is to put them over. That's what it is. I mean, why do you think they don't have long-term contracts? Huh? Why do you think a lot of the people that are signing newer contracts to stay with AEW are the originals? Why do you think those that come in from WWE are signing short-term 2 to 3 year contracts? Because their goal, for most of the majority that they're there, is not to become champions, which eventually they will, but to mainly put over the AEW original talent. Basically the future. And that's the truest of true facts. And last night on the debut episode on TBS, we saw that. We saw that with the AEW World Title match, and we saw that, with the TBS Championship Tournament final. We saw that. And that is a fact. Why do you think Sting is with Darby Allin? He's mentoring him, and by mentoring him, he's putting him over. Why do you think Will Hobbs has been involved in certain situations with talent like Punk and Moxley and many others? Jericho. Put them over. Not put them, but for them, by association, into matches, if you will, to put him over. That's why you see these people, why you see guys like him being associated with these people is what I'm trying to say. So when you get down to it, folks, when you get down to it, long story short, last night on TBS, we saw basically a strong example of that, not just in 2 championship matches. Not just in 2 strong championship matches, no. We saw that in other places, like Jericho and his involvement with 2.0 and Daniel Garcia. 2.0, we know what was once Everrise. Alright? Yeah, people can say they reinvented themselves when they went to AEW, but they're still Everrise. The only reason they're in the program they're in right now with Jericho and Kingston and Santana and Ortiz centers around Daniel Garcia. That's why. That is why. End of discussion. Jericho's association in this whole situation eventually is to put over Eddie Kingston, because people view him as an AEW original, but to also put over Daniel Garcia. End of story. End of discussion there. I mean, when Sting and Darby Allin faced, 2.0, aka Everrise, didn't they get like a victory or something over them? Or something happened where they got some kind of victory? Why do you think Sting did it? To get those guys over. Even though they are from NXT and WWE, which we know of, by reinventing themselves, they, in the eyes of some fans, they became originals. But why do you think Sting, Darby Allin, and those that work with them, were, fighting the likes of Daniel Garcia and 2.0? One, to get 2.0 over in AEW because people still saw him as Everrise, but mainly Daniel Garcia. You see, there's a pattern. There is a pattern. And now Jericho's involved in this whole situation. Why do you think the Inner Circle was involved with America's Top Team in Men of the Year? To get Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page over. That's why. Why do you think Cody Rhodes is involved with Sammy Guevara and Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page? Get them over. That's why. You see, at the end of the day, and last night being a good example of it, like I said, out of those 2 matches and other, spots throughout the show, the main purpose, when you really think about it now, especially after last night, for all these former WWE talents to come over and become all elite, it is to get mainly a lot of the AEW established talent known as originals over. Adam Cole did the same thing. Adam Cole, since he's been in AEW, maybe his singles record doesn't show it that much, but he has been associated in matches and the like to where basically he has helped put over the AEW originals. That is what he's done. That is what he's done. End of story. End of story. The same thing's going to be said for Kyle and Bobby Fish, Red Dragon. They're going to get some victories on their hands. They're going to challenge for the tag titles. There's no doubt. But eventually, just like he's been doing already, Kyle's going to follow suit. If you will. Kyle's going to follow suit. Their goal will to be get the Young Bucks over when that match eventually happens. And Adam Cole, by association, if they're going the direction people say they are, is to get Omega over. Basically, the goal, long story short, bring this to a close, if you will, is for a lot of the former WWE talent that comes in, that eventually gets put together if they've had a history with each other, like Red Dragon, Adam Cole, Undisputed Era, if you will. Their main goal is to basically put over the AEW originals. And last night, like I said, was a great example of that with Hangman Page beating Danielson, Jade beating Ruby, Jericho's interaction with Daniel Garcia in 2.0, Punk to an extent with MJF. The list could go on. The list could go on, and it's been proven as such in the past. But that is what their main goal is since they've arrived. Disagree with me if you want, that's fine. But you know it to be true. You see it as well as I do. And if you want a good example, go back and watch those Dynamites. Go back and watch those Rampages. Go back and watch those Darks, those Elevations. Go back and watch some of the pay-per-views, and you will see that a majority of the time, the people that have come out on top look better at the end of the whole thing has been AEW Originals. That is why these former WWE talents are here. That is why they don't have long-term contracts like maybe the AEW Originals do. Because the goal is to establish these men and women of the future, so that when Chris Jericho leaves, so that when Adam Cole and O'Reilly and Fish leave, when Punk leaves, Danielson leaves, the list could go on. The moment all these people leave, Christian Cage, to an extent, since he's been here, he's been doing the same thing. Matt Hardy, once all these guys leave, even Jeff, after he shows up, does his thing, the Hardy Boy deal, and then they leave, whatever. Their main goal at the end of the day is, once it's all said and done, and that roster of All Elite Wrestling is basically filled with nothing but AEW Originals, then at the end of that day, when it's all said and done, and that roster is just filled with AEW Originals, not a single former WWE talent, then the mission would have been complete, because everybody will know who each and every one of those men and women are on that roster, even if they walk the streets or they walk into a restaurant or a supermarket. End of discussion. End of discussion. But that's what I saw last night, especially with the fact that the opening match for the world title hammered that home more so than anything, and then Ruby, jobbing and basically putting over Jade was icing on the cake. End of story. End of story. But what did you guys think of TBS's debut of what did you think of Dynamite's debut on TBS last night? How did you feel about it? Do you think a lot of the outcomes were the right outcomes to go with? And do you agree with what I've said, that basically the reason a lot of these former WWE talents are here in All Elite Wrestling, especially being proven more so than anything last night, is to help put over the established AEW Originals, the future of this business? What are your thoughts? Comment down below, live chat during the premiere, like the video, check me out at my Teespring store, also check me out at BW Rose's Discussions and all your favorite audio podcast locations, except for Pandora. I am close to 300 podcasts, guys, so be on the lookout for the 300th one when it shows up. And if you are listening to me on Anchor.fm, basically the listener support has been activated, and if you're listening to me on various outlets like Spotify and maybe Apple and Amazon that enable video podcasting, you will have a choice of two, that being the audio and the video, to listen or view the podcast on. Also, check me out at BW Roses on VENMO. Check me out at patreon.com/BW Roses to support me with the $1, $3 tier. And also check me out at Venmo at Brian-Walmer-2. But what do you guys think so far about this whole situation with AEW? Was it proven more so last night in the TBS debut with Dynamite that the only purpose for a lot of these WWE talents, since the beginning, is to put over the AEW Originals? What are your thoughts? Let me know down below in the comments as well as in the live chat, and I'm out.